along with the rest of my cognition, my memory has really cleared up and improved lately. I feel like more and more often I remember things when I need to without as many external aids, and I remember it feels like each thing fits into the whole map of my concepts. So here is, for a while I was in homeschool school and spent a lot of time therefore having to memorize things in somewhat of an arbitrary way. Not as bad as if I had been in public school, but still. So I spent a lot of time researching memory and memory techniques, etc. From that, I learned that a lot of memory is about, spaced repetition. So a program like Anki makes this automatic, and I lived on Anki for a couple of years, and I just burned out. But that is you take one thing, and if you repeat that you want to remember, then you repeat it, say after 10 minutes, then after half an hour, then after a day, then a week, then 2 weeks. If you do that for longer and longer, it sort of will go into your long-term memory. This is the skeleton of the way that when you're integrating a fact, that will naturally work. You think about it, and you're reminded of it, and then as it becomes more of just an effortless part of you, it's like you're consciously reminded of it less and less, but it's in the long term, so in the situation, it'll come up. So spaced repetition, and then memory is about connections and context. Because what you're wanting to do is think of thing A in the right, not just like thinking about it all the time, but it's about in the context when you need it, having something in that context trigger the memory so that thing A will come back. And a lot of that and the details of that and ways to kind of force it or produce that for something that you have to memorize, I learned from the Universe of Memory, I believe, program about language learning. Very good. It goes into a lot of detail about the science view, like the modern science approach to memory. But now, just like you have your web of concepts, and the thing is to plug this thing into that web and make as many connections as possible so that it's as firmly fixed into that web as it can be. And from these contextual connections, you're going to always get back to that memory, and it's like fixed in there, and it's not going to go away therefore and be forgotten. If something's completely disconnected to everything else, it'll just float away. There's nothing to hold it. And the best way to review something is, even in like a spaced repetition form, is not just repeating the same thing with the same triggers in the same context, but reviewing and actually building the concept and elaborating on it in new contexts. And so that each time you review, you're also sort of relearning it and adding to the concept itself so that it grows a little bit with every pass around. And I guess it's basically this general structure of how memory works has become more organic now, especially now that I don't currently have to memorize anything arbitrarily, and I'm allowed to just remember what I actually need and use in my daily life. So you could think of this as, I guess, like to keep a plant, if you plant a seed, and to keep that seed alive would be like retaining the memory, and you want to water it periodically. And then I think actually they do need more water earlier in their development, a tree or something. But however, since it's living, it's not just repeat stuff, repeat. also elaboration. So every time you water the plant, it will grow a little bit more and a little bit more. And itself is developing with each pass around and watering. So it's like that. The other principle being that we remember what is salient and like sticks out in our minds. So of course, try to make things stick and make things connect, but just like in school or an environment where you're forced to artificially and arbitrarily remember certain things, it's so difficult. Like, I have had to unlearn, even with my schooling was lower pressure than most people's, but I still had to unlearn a lot of extra structure that I really, I will unlearn all the extra structure and like pressure to remember everything, or to remember these details that honestly aren't important to me and that I'm not going to use. I'm not going to be tested on this, so I don't have to do that anymore. But yeah, you just compare, I guess, the way that memory works now that there's really, that it's much more arbitrary versus in the old days where you'd be remembering the details of your livelihood or trade that you were learning, or even if you were in a monastery, the hymns and the lots of information that you're memorizing. It still worked into your whole world that you're living in, and the ritual and the liturgy that you're doing all the time. And it's living and it's alive. So the first thing that has improved my memory is just being out of that environment, like just taking most of the pressure off. I mean, maybe my memory hasn't technically improved my ability to remember things arbitrarily, it's just I don't have to do it anymore. So I can see how good I actually am at remembering things that are genuinely salient and that I need and that I'm going to use. Just kidding. Yeah, which helps. Things are more coherent. I think of it more now. I connect a lot the concept of memory and body. Like when I remember something, I'm taking that and making it a part of me and a part of the way that I exist in this world and form myself and act in the world and interact. And it's similar to the body, even as in like the cells are constantly changing and losing skin and regaining. Like I may remember and forget various little facts, but the general shape of my knowledge and worldview is formed, sort of grows out of all the little things that stick or that don't stick, and it's just this whole organic process. When I am reading something or learning something and trying to fix it in my mind, I have that analogy in mind, but it's really more real, that's what it feels like, is closing my eyes, sort of taking stock of my whole web of knowledge and areas of life in which I need something, and feeling this new information slot into place and be fixed there. And then it's a sort of okay, I can let that go, and if it's a useful idea, I'm going to need it again, and I will come back around to it, and I will remember it again, and if it's not, then why should I just arbitrarily try to uphold it? Evidently I don't need it, so it can fall away. So being out of school, having an idea of how memory works and a sort of concept of it as building a living system of myself, and taking what sticks and what fits in with everything else. And also having generally a clearer mind, just less worry and less pressure helps so much, because I feel like now, if I want to focus on something and integrate it, I can more make a clear space, focus on that thing, and really receive it and have an empty space in myself to see it and to take it in. And that means that the idea sticks more and has sort of space to root. a phrase that I repeated a lot with helping myself getting over the stress of having to write down everything that I thought in my diary, lest I should forget it. But it applies elsewhere as well, which is, if it's true, it'll come back. Also, if it's true, it'll come back better. Which is basically the idea of that. If this thing that you're trying, or idea that you're trying to integrate, truly is true and useful and going to be a living part of your life, then there will be another context in which this will come up. It will remind you, and it'll come back and actually be elaborated on and reviewed, which both elaborates the idea and is further learning, and it's review, it's both at once. So that's one thing, and sort of trusting the process of memory instead of trying so hard to hang on to things and control it. As I have relaxed more, I remember more. And in the Christian cosmos, there's angels and spirits that are these patterns that are in the world, which is really what I'm trying to integrate, is some sort of pattern and some sort of idea. If I conceive of those as kind of living or independent entities, or not even entities maybe, but just independent patterns and threads in the world that exist outside of me, that still have their own being, even if I do forget them, they still exist, and it's sort of an interaction between me and this idea, or this angel and this pattern, and it is giving itself to me, and I'm taking it in, but it's not just I'm making this ex nihilo, just having to hold on to it and sustain it all myself, but rather, having that idea come close and move off, and when we move off, become a part of me eventually, a living relationship way. That theological, more enchanted world, the idea helped my memory work a lot more smoothly. In secular terms, just trusting the process instead of trying to control it. Thinking of it okay, I kind of hold on to this for a minute and then surrender it back to the web of spiritual patterns and forces which is all around me anyway, and sort of always interacting with me. Humans being sort of hosts for, or any being, I think, embodied being sort of a host for angels and patterns, then it's it feels natural to say, okay, I've got this, thank you, it's more of a gift, I've got it, it'll come back when I need it, trust that to, that angel now, and let go of it, and then, oh, if it came back, oh, that's nice. But seeing it as all of these threads and these spirits, and that actually make my memory just work smoother and better anyway. Along with being a beautiful idea, it also works. Related to all of this, the things that I'm trying to remember and integrate, I think of rather than remember, because a lot of remember, it just tends to be this dead concept of rote memorization, and you have to just spit it back up. It's really difficult to hold on to things like that. It's not alive, it's not relevant. It's you're really putting a lot of obstacles in the way of somebody expecting them to remember things in that way. But the things that I'm trying to integrate now are more coherent just naturally, and are broader patterns that apply fractally on a lot of different levels and a lot of different scales, anywhere from my daily life and personal struggles and like a book that I'm reading and the concepts that I'm learning, these same patterns come up and grow, and like sometimes on a large scale, sometimes on a small scale, and all of this sort of having a more coherent worldview in general, and trying to learn not just isolated concepts, say in science or in math, but having them be this pattern, angel, spirit, etc., that spans more layers and can be in more shapes, is sort of this, it's a natural, it does the whole spaced repetition, review, new context thing naturally. Like that's just what happens when I'm learning all of these broader, more integrated and living patterns. For instance, and these aren't necessarily something that I could be tested on and spit out the right answer, or something that would be considered useful in the conventional or like the academic world necessarily. Because I'm away from the pressure of that world, I am able to see that these are actually, like, this is really how my memory works and is supposed to work. It was made to work, and it's helping me live my life, and like everything's a lot smoother as far as memory is concerned. For instance, I was watching a video on the Jurassic World sequels and why some of them are, what makes a movie franchise lose sort of its heart and just go wrong, and what are the characteristics of when this happens. And this reminded me of, and I mapped onto it, sort of the general pattern of the fall, like losing the connection with the original life and source, and then going just into deadness and striving to get some kind of life and originality independently, but it just doesn't work because there's no, and it's basically all of those patterns and that whole gestalt and all of the expectations from that really do apply also to this Jurassic World. So that helps me to understand the video, understand the concept, and also more deeply understand and remember and integrate the idea of the fall in Christian theology, but also it applies everywhere, of just how things fall apart generally, and how a person or an idea or an organization can lose its life and heart and become dead and fake and like, yeah. Or this concept that I've been using a lot lately of the matrix support or space for something, and then how to create that, and then also what emerges from that space and then holds it together, which applies everywhere from finding the energy and motivation to do a certain task, or to do a certain task to a certain standard, and what is the standard for it, and what should my expectations be in certain contexts, or my own growth as a person, and it applies in other areas too. And there's probably concepts in more traditional academic memorize-y subjects that I will use this in too, or that it could be applied to. In short, my memory has become so much more clear and just relaxing. I feel like I have a good memory, and I can take, if I want to remember something, I can take it, fix it in there, and then figure, like, if I need it, it'll come back. Most of that is removing artificial pressure to arbitrarily remember things, having a more living and useful and, living and integrated relationship with what I am learning. And if you believe in angels or a spiritual world, it makes it easier to remember things.